Hi everyone! I hope you're all having a great week.
Before I start talking about this week's video, I wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone because over this past weekend, I reached and then passed 100 subscribers. So I'm really excited about that, and I wouldn't have been able to do it, of course, without you. So thank you again so much for watching and for being with me on this journey.
This week, I'm working on two little intuitive abstract art pieces using watercolors. The process is free-flowing and lots of fun. I'll be using some of my favorite colors to create my initial background, and then I'll pull out my white pen and black markers to create some doodles and simple repetitive patterns. At the end of my process, I'll add some gold watercolor paint to add some shine to my artwork. The whole process is relaxing and very meditative, much like neurographic art. Fun, and at the end of your process, you'll have created a beautiful little diptych to decorate your home or to give to someone you love. Let's get going with the creative process.
I've taped down 2 pieces of watercolor paper measuring 5 by 6 inches. To start my painting process, I use a large mop brush to add water to both of my pieces of paper. Working very quickly, I then add a light wash of color to the wet paper. Once I'm done with this first step, I let my paper dry completely. Next, I add my first real pop of color and I make it flow from one piece of paper onto the other. In this part of the process, I don't want my forms to be too rigid, so I'll use a spray bottle with water to spray some water onto the wet paint so that it can move the paint and create its own forms. While there's still lots of water on the paper, I start to dab in a different, darker shade of blue. Next, I repeat the same process using a different, more complementary color. As I continue my process, I use my water bottle to add some more spritzes of water to move the paint. Since I'm working intuitively, I don't really have a set plan for my painting. I'm just looking at my paint palette and I'm making decisions as I go along. I think this green will add another interesting pop of color to my paintings. Working with watercolors wet on wet like this is very freeing, and it releases the pressure of having to create something very specific. I just let the water take over and move the paint in any way it wishes to move it. Before this dries, I use a pipette to drop some rubbing alcohol onto my work surface. This will create some shapes that I'll use later on in my artwork. Once I'm done with this part, it's important for me to let the pieces completely dry before moving on to the next step. Watercolors always dry lighter and more muted than when they are first applied. So in this second part of the process, I'm adding some less diluted paint, so much more pigmented paint, to my surface because I want to have colors that will pop and contrast against the background. I won't use all of the colors that I've added in the initial background to do this, but I will use some colors that are bright, and I'll also use a color that is very dark for contrast. While being careful not to touch any of the wet paint, I start to add some gold to the splotches I created using the rubbing alcohol. I've decided I need a little bit more brightness in the two pieces, so I'm going to add this beautiful bright blue to each of the different pieces because it will really help make the colors, that color pop in particular. To help my circles pop, I'm adding some Caran water-soluble crayon around my gold spots. Then I use a clean brush and some water to dilute and blend these areas. Now it's time to start doodling. For this part of the process, I'll be working mostly with black markers and pens as well as some white pens. I'm keeping the process as simple as possible by creating dots, simple lines, and little circles. Working in this repetitive way makes the process very relaxing. There really is no right or wrong way to do this part of the process. I'm just looking at my backgrounds for shapes that have been created by the water as it was moving on my paper. And then I'll draw in some lines or some dots in some of those shapes that I find. Because I'm working on a diptych, I want to make sure that whatever patterns and shapes I create on one side, I repeat on the other side of the painting. This will make both little pieces of artwork more cohesive. It's really neat how using a simple white pen and a black pen and creating very simple dots or lines or shapes completely transforms these little paintings and makes them much more interesting and visually appealing. I'm really liking what I'm seeing so far. Adding some white and black to this colorful background is also a great way to create more contrast. Now it's time to start adding some more gold to my pieces. I really like working with gold, of course, because it's so shimmery. But that shimmery, iridescent characteristic of gold is also a really nice contrast to the matte paint in the background. With these final touches of gold, I'm ready to call my paintings done. I hope it was an enjoyable process for you to watch, and I really hope you'll give this process a try. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week and happy creating!